These are the 7 elements that make up the basics of screenplay formatting. I'm going to explain what they are and how to properly introduce them into your screenplay. I'll also introduce the bonus elements that is in some screenplays, well, at least some of my favorite screenplays. And then I'm going to end this video by explaining 4 ways that you could aggravate a reader with incorrect formatting, as well as overdoing some of the elements that we'll discuss shortly. I hope that's incentive enough to stick around to the end. But let's start with formatting basics to get you writing as soon as possible. We'll start with transitions. These are the 3 most common transitions I've seen. You could start your screenplay using the fade in transition, you could cut to different scenes using the cut to transition, and you could end your screenplay with the fade out transition. Fade in could be aligned on the right or on the left, similarly with fade out, whereas cut to is aligned on the right. With all these transitions, the letters are uppercase and you have a colon after the words. Fade in is most commonly seen at the start of screenplays, but this is not necessarily a firm rule. You could start your screenplay with music over a black screen, you could start with a quote, you could also start your film with a scene. It's really up to you. Talking about starting your film with a scene, let's segue into how to write a scene heading, also known as a slugline. I like to check the following 3 boxes when I am writing a scene heading: the where, the what, and the when. You want to ask yourself, where is your scene taking place? Is it outside or is it inside? If your scene is taking place inside, we use INT, all caps, full stop, for interior. And outside, we're looking at using EXT, full stop or period, and again, all caps locks, and that is for exterior. Here are some examples of well-known screenplays using EXT or INT, but here's another example of where you could be moving from inside to outside. Then you would use INT, period, /EXT, period, and vice versa. Next, I ask, what is the location of my scene? You can narrow down on specific locations using a dash. Finally, you want to reference the time of day. When is your scene taking place? You could also use continuous if you're jumping between scenes. So that's scene headings. We're going to move on to character introductions next. Typically, you start with the individual's name in all uppercase text. This is then followed by the age of your character as well as a short description of your character. No one does this better than Nancy Myers. Here's an example from how she describes Erica in Something's Gotta Give. From here, you typically go on to describe the action in the scene. What is happening in the scene? And you write this all in the present tense. For example, don't say, the woman saw a pair of bare men's legs poking out from under the door. Keep your focus on the now. Also write in third person. The goal of these action lines are to tell the reader what they will see and hear in the film other than dialogue. So if there is a sound or a specific object you want to highlight, write it in all caps. Next, we're going to look at dialogue. You will typically find the dialogue in the middle of the page. You may also want to include some extensions as and when they are relevant. For example, voiceover and off-screen are 2 extensions that you will commonly find in screenplays. Voiceover could be narration or internal dialogue spoken by a character. In the film Something's Gotta Give, we start with a voiceover. Off-screen is used when another character is speaking and we can hear them, but they are not seen by the audience or by other characters. Think of a voice coming from a phone call or from a voice coming from an announcement speaker. You could even have the voice of someone that is heard that could be in another room screaming through the house so that you could hear them in the room where your character is in. We're going to look at parentheticals next. You would use parentheticals if you want to give a note to the actor on how you would like them to perform the dialogue. Parentheticals are placed directly beneath the character ID in parentheses. As you see, it provides direction that gives the actor insight into what you had in mind when you wrote the dialogue. It can give an indication of how you would like something said, or it can point to an action you want your character to do while saying the dialogue. So before we get into the what not to do when it comes to formatting your screenplays, let's discuss that bonus element that I find in a lot of my favorite screenplays, and that is a montage. You could introduce the wording, begin montage, like you would introduce a subheading, all caps and a colon after. From here, you have options. I've seen some screenplays where there are lines listed or lines introduced by hyphens followed by an action that introduces the montage location or subscene. However, in some screenplays, scenes are added under the introduction of the montage. This makes sense because from a production point of view, each of these scenes, even though they may be short, require different setups. And then to end your montage, you could again end it in a subheading. So end montage all in caps locks with a period to follow. Or I've also seen it included in the last line of action in a scene. Again, all caps ending with a period. Now we're going to look at the what not part to do when it comes to formatting your screenplay. Now, I didn't go to film school. The only experience I've had is from the real world, and that includes submitting my screenplays to screenwriting competitions and also having my screenplays sent out marketed on my behalf. So the feedback I'm giving you is from my experience. I think if you were to go to film school, you might have a specific set of instructions with regards to formatting your screenplays, but what I've seen in the real world is that there are no hard and fast rules. In some instances, when I have submitted my screenplays to screenwriting competitions, I've seen that some screenwriting competitions are very strict on formatting, whereas other rounds of the same competition or just other competitions in general seem to focus more on story. And I think if we were to look at some of the most famous screenwriters and the screenplays they've written, you would see that there are no hard and fast rules. People do their own thing. Generally, there are most of the common things that I've described today that are pretty fixed. But you will see that people have their own way of doing things. So as much as I'd like to come out here and say, this is how it should be done, if I were to look at my favorite screenplays, they don't necessarily do it the way that majority of the people do it. So I think as long as your screenplay is easy to read and you, to some degree, focus on the elements that I've mentioned today, you should be okay. But do yourself a favor and read some screenplays, and then you'll see, like the examples I've shared with you today, people do things differently. With that said, there are some things that seem to aggravate readers, at least the readers that I've come into contact with over the years of submitting my screenplays. So let's get into some of the things that I've been cautioned not to do. We're going to start with transitions. Don't use too many of them. So in one of the first screenplays that I wrote, I was so excited at the prospect of linking my scenes to make it super easy for the director to see what I had in mind, but also to hopefully speed up the pace of my screenplay. For example, I had water splashing out of a cup transition into a scene where a foot emerged splashing through a puddle of water. The feedback I got is that directors don't like being told what to do. They like the screenwriter to focus on story, and they prefer it if you give them the space to add their magic to your screenplay. Again, this is not a hard and fast rule. This is just a note I was once given on a screenplay. Following on from that, don't overuse parentheticals. So the notes that I was once given is that actors don't like being told what to do. If you give them too much direction using parentheticals, you may rob them of the space in which they would find the character. Then the next one is a common mistake I definitely made at the beginning of my screenwriting career, and it's a mistake that I've seen a lot of emerging or newbies to the world of screenwriting make as well, and that is writing far too many action lines. So when you're reading a screenplay, it helps with the pacing if you just get to the point with your action lines and to not overdo them. So 2 examples of screenplays that I've read recently that were fast-paced galore were Don't Look Up and that new Jennifer Lawrence movie, I don't want to date this video. What was it called? No Hard Feelings. Those 2. I started reading those screenplays and literally it felt like I just took a breath and I was finished. And that was because the action lines were so concise and precise. There weren't too many of them. The story just flowed. If you're finding yourself writing paragraph after paragraph of action lines, maybe remind yourself that you're writing a movie, not a novel. But in the same breath, I do find every word that Nancy Meyers puts on the page to be a real treat. And even though her action lines are by no means long, she still takes a moment to describe certain places or people with just enough words to make you feel connected to someone or to some place. So the general rule when it comes to writing action lines, and I did not invent this, I cannot remember where I first heard this though, but it is that the amount of time that it takes to describe your action line in a sentence should be equivalent to the amount of time it takes to visually represent what it was that you had originally written down. So, for example, she doesn't waste a second and reaches for the door, where she grabs the door handle and then twists it. She then checks over her shoulder to see if anyone notices and then leaps outside. That's very long. It could be written as, she reaches for the door, grabs and twists the handle, checking over her shoulder before leaping outside. Finally, if this is your first time writing a screenplay, don't make the mistake I made, and that was writing my screenplay in Word. So if you're going to do that, you are just going to spend so much time manually adjusting margins and pressing tab way too many times. I encourage you to use a screenwriting software because this takes care of all of the margins and alignment for you. If you would like me to make a video where I compare different screenwriting softwares, let me know, and I'll consider making a video about that in the future. But other than that, good luck with writing your screenplay. For more of the many mistakes I made as a beginner screenwriter, you can check out the video that I will leave for you in the end screen. So I'll see you there. Take care, guys. Bye.